What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Walkout Podcast,
where we talk about fights, news, and more.
And today we're bringing you our predictions for UFC 323 that takes place this Saturday in the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. And we're going to preview the entire main card, of course, starting off with the first fight on the card between Yan Blachowicz and Bogdan Guskov. Of course, Bogdan Guskov is a very prolific finisher. He has, I believe, 4 finishes in his last 4 fights, which is very, very decent, of course. However, I would argue that none of those opponents that he has finished are even close to the level of Yan Blachowicz. So, do you expect him to get another finish, or is Yan simply too much for him to handle here?
I mean, I think it's a difficult fight to predict because, even though, of course, I also rate Yan Blachowicz here very much because of his really impressive record and just his presence in the UFC that he has had. I do think that, he's 42 years old, he's starting to get already when you're 40 years old, you're very, very old for the UFC. And even if it is the light heavyweight division, where some fighters can remain even after they're in the late 30s, for example, I do think that 42 years old, you're gonna start slowing down a lot, I think. But still, I do think that, just as you pointed out, the fact that Bogdan Guskov, he hasn't fought anyone really on the level of Yan Blachowicz, not even close, I believe.
Yeah.
So I agree with that, and I think that, Bogdan Guskov, in his earlier fights, has always had a pretty big reach advantage, a big power advantage. He's always looked very physically strong, and he is a very physically, athletically strong opponent, fighter.
Yeah.
And he has very long reach. But we have to, when we look at Yan Blachowicz, he might be an inch shorter than Bogdan Guskov, but he has longer reach.
Yeah.
Quite significantly longer reach, actually. So that's the thing here. I think that Yan Blachowicz, he can just move around, he can tap him up with his longer reach, and Bogdan Guskov is the one that's going to have to close the gap in order to get, the finish that I think he needs, because I don't think that he can win this on a decision versus Yan Blachowicz, who has almost never also been knocked out before.
Exactly. He's barely been hurt, right?
He's barely been hurt before, and so I think that even if you're someone like Bogdan Guskov, who you'll back yourself, you'll think that I'll have knocked out everyone I've met so far in the UFC.
Yeah.
I'm going to knock out this guy. He's old. I don't think that that's going to hold up versus someone like Yan Blachowicz. I think the level is too high. I think that even though he's 42 years old, I do think that his chin will hold up simply because it has done for, such a long time now. There's no real, even though he's older, there's no real reason for it just randomly to go away and him to get knocked out. If he does get knocked out, I think it's a big achievement.
Yeah, of course.
That's a massive achievement for Guskov, because that really proved his power. But I do think that Yan Blachowicz is going to be able to survive this, and more than survive, I think he's going to be able to win this via unanimous decision. I think I'm going with here.
All right, interesting. Yeah, I get your points there, and I mean, Yan Blachowicz, he just seems to be cheating age. I mean, I thought that he's old for the last 6 or 7 years, and he just continues to put on decent performance after decent performance. I remember the one against Alex Pereira, which he of course lost, but it was a very close fight, and he was old at that stage of his career as well. Of course, he had a very competitive fight that he also won against Israel Adesanya. Yeah. When, even though Izzy went up in weight class, that was Izzy in his prime, which is of course incredibly impressive. And Yan actually didn't just win that fight on points, but he he was using his striking with Izzy and actually had a lot of success. So
he also got takedowns as well.
Yeah.
Fight, so
he mixes it up really well. Both his kickboxing is amazing and his grappling as well, as we saw against Carlos Ulberg, which I actually believe he won that fight. And I can't say that time is a factor here, because of course Father Time is undefeated, but it hasn't showed to be coming after Yan Blachowicz yet, which is amazing since he's 42. I mean, some guys are old, like Alex Pereira, and we say, he can't be going that much longer. But I mean, Yan is one of the best guys in the division and a problem for everyone, and he's 42.
Yeah.
But all in all, I'm going to agree with you with those. I don't need to repeat what you said, because I do agree with those facts there. So I'm also actually going to be a bit boring and agree with you with the prediction as well, because I do think that Blachowicz gets this one done with a unanimous decision here on Saturday.
Yeah, so moving on up the card, we have a bantamweight bout between Henry Cejudo and Peyton Talbot.
Oh, this one is also quite interesting and very even on odds as well. I think Peyton Talbot is a slight favorite, but Henry Cejudo, of course, a former double champ. And even though he's getting a bit older, you can't underestimate the skill. I personally thought he was finished when he fought Merab, and Merab did whatever he wanted with him. But then Merab went on to be the bantamweight GOAT and does that to basically everyone. So can you blame Cejudo for that? Not really, especially since he's a bit of a smaller bantamweight fighter as well for the division. Of course, Cejudo doesn't look anywhere close as good as he did, and I'm not going to go into his skills, because if you're listening to this, you already know how incredibly skilled he is, especially, of course, in the grappling. But as a mixed martial artist, he just does everything incredibly well. Yeah. In my opinion, this is more a question of hunger, and if he's going to be motivated and still have that bit, fire inside to actually push him on. Because this is a tough fight against an up-and-coming contender. Peyton Talbot, very exciting, has showed a lot of skill. However, has he fought someone with, just the accolades of Henry Cejudo? No, not even close. No. So a little bit similar to the last fight, even though Guskov is, of course, not as big of a up-and-coming star as Talbot is. For me, this is a really hard one to call, but I'm actually gonna back the King of Cringe here and go with the Henry Cejudo points win, unanimous decision, I think. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you. I think that Henry Cejudo, just the skill that he has, that we have seen before, at least, I think that will back him up in this fight. And when I look at a guy like Peyton Talbot, yes, he is a prospect. Yes, he has skills of his own. Yeah. When he fought another prospect in Felipe Lima, I wasn't completely convinced. I thought that it was a pretty secure win. He looks, if I'll say this, I give it to him that he is mature for his age. He looks like he's pretty mature, pretty secure for his age. But he doesn't have that much about him. He doesn't really have that much power. He doesn't even have that good wrestling or just offensive threat. And I think that someone like Cejudo, just what he can bring to the table in terms of technique, covering every base, I think that will match up well against someone like Talbot, who, although he has good fight IQ, is pretty mature, and he does have also a good technical base. I think that someone like Cejudo, even though he's a bit shorter, he might not have the reach advantage. I think that Cejudo is going to go for the knockout, the resting on this one. He's going to go for the takedowns on this one. Of course, yeah. And I think that we saw someone like Felipe Lima, he did have some success with his takedowns versus Talbot and the grappling. And I think that we can see something similar here, especially since that Cejudo is just a much higher tier of grappler than
exactly. The jump here, I respect it from Talbot to take this fight, but to go from
it's a big
Lima to Cejudo, and even though Cejudo at, is he 37 or 38 now? Even at that age, say he's 60% of the fighter he once was. I still reckon 60% of Henry Cejudo is very much enough to beat the current Peyton Talbot.
Yeah, and Peyton Talbot also lost versus Ronnie Barcelos.
That's true. Yeah.
So earlier, in on UFC 11, so
that's
free level. So
what would be your prediction then? What do you think?
I think I predict the same thing. I think I'm gonna predict actually unanimous decision win for Henry Cejudo here. I don't know if he gets it done within the 3 rounds, but I do think that
he gets a decision.
Yeah, he gets a decision, because it's hard to say if he can. Talbot he's the type of guy who he has such high fight IQ. He might not be the best grappler or wrestler, but he's good enough to at least defend the submissions, I believe, and
stay alive.
Yeah, stay alive, defend some of the takedowns, and also I don't think that Talbot is going to get pieced up on the striking, really. I think that this more comes down to Cejudo's ability to grapple with him.
Yeah.
And I think that Cejudo wins this by unanimous decision. Yeah, that's my prediction.
Alright, it's going to be an interesting one, that's for sure. Moving on up the card, and we have a flyweight bout between Brandon Moreno and Tatsuro Taira. And I know I sound like a broken record, but it's a bit of a similar situation here as well as in both previous fights. We have Brandon Moreno, a really experienced, really skilled guy, coming up against a guy with only one loss, who is a bit more hungry and has a bit more to prove. Although the age gap isn't as big here, it's still, they are at very different points in their career. And it almost comes down to what do you favor? Someone who has that real hunger and just fighting to make their name big, or just the pure skill that we think Brandon Moreno has showed. I mean, he's very... this might be controversial, but it's quite close to being a perfect mixed martial artist, in my opinion, when it comes to how well he strings his skills together. I think it's really, really impressive. However, he hasn't looked as good in his recent performances, and that worries me somewhat.
He hasn't really developed in the past 2 years, almost 3 years, right?
That's interesting, and I think he's 31 now. Yeah. It's not in this sport. I mean, how old was Pantoja when he won the belt? It's not like you should be done when you're 31, like in other sports, and then you just enter your prime. You should still be showing more and developing. I mean,
more improvement every fight.
Exactly. The best guys like Islam Makhachev, they still do that, even though they're like 34 for whatever they are. So that worries me quite a bit. And Tatsuro Taira, to speak of him here, is his striking is really impressive. I mean, from the little I've seen of him, he moves really well, and like as a boxing fan, it's also very clean to see, because sometimes you can tell when a grappling guy or a wrestler just learns how to strike and how to defend, mostly in striking. But he has some really crisp striking at Taira does. So, and that worries me as well for Brandon Moreno, who has taken quite a bit of damage in his career. So I know on odds this might be an odd shout. I actually reckon that Taira can put him out, either with a TKO or like ground and pound here. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, you know, it's a difficult one to predict, just as we spoke about here, because you have a guy in Moreno, you talked about, you know, his technique, how he's a complete martial artist, which I completely agree with. So on paper, you maybe look at this and say that, well, Moreno should have the advantage, but things fights aren't fought on paper. Yeah. And you know, Moreno's record, just the way he hasn't really showed up the level that he should have showed in the latest, 2 years. I think that Taira is someone with more hunger, and also Taira, he has really good power, or at least good boxing. True. And I think that's a good weapon. He has the right to just unload.
It's crisp, right? It's really good.
Crisp right to unload and just put someone out with. And then also, he actually has submission threat as well, and takedowns, which he submitted Park Hyun-sung in their bout, his last bout before this fight. And I think that Taira probably has the advantage on the feet, just simply because of his knockout power. Yeah. And he also has, he does have something to give on the ground as well. Even though Moreno might be the more technical overall, Taira, I think he has enough threat to be able to, maybe keep it on the feet.
He's a dynamic threat, right?
He's a dynamic threat. He's not only, a striker or a boxer, but he's mostly that, mainly a boxer or striker. But he can show up with a submission if, I don't know, Moreno, maybe he overextends or something.
Yeah. But it has to be said, if we see the best Brandon Moreno here, he's closing this one out quite comfortably.
Yeah, I think.
But just on his recent fight, I always go by form, because I believe that's how you need to predict things. And by that, I have to go with Taira here. But I think it's going to be quite a close fight, I reckon. Certainly if a guy doesn't get a finish, I don't expect it to be a landslide in terms of domination or anything like that. I think they're quite similar at this point in their career.
Okay, so moving up down the card here, we have the co-main event with Alexander Pantoja versus Joshua Wan in a flyweight title bout. This one is, I think I'm really excited for this one. Since seeing Joshua Wan break into the UFC, every fight I've tried to follow him as much as possible. I think he has fought 4 times this year or something. Yeah, it's incredible. Just the activity, and not only the activity in how many fights it takes, also the activity in the fights themselves.
That's it.
The amount of strikes he throws. He's such an active fighter, such an impressive fighter, I think. And he has a lot of hype about him, but the big problem is here. He managed to get past Brandon Royval recently in an impressive performance. But now he's up against
Pantoja.
Pantoja, the title holder.
Yeah, who is just a complete package.
Is it too big of a step up, you reckon? Comparing Brandon Royval versus
Pantoja. It's tough for me to say because, like most UFC fans by now, I know that you've been following Joshua Van a while, but a lot of us have just been aware of him in his last few fights since they have drawn so much attention in the way he fights, and it's incredibly entertaining. And to do that well against guys like Royval at 24 years of age is incredible. And I am rooting for him here. I'm not gonna lie, because I think he's so exciting, and change of the guard at flyweight would be a bit needed, I actually think. However, I'm not gonna disrespect Pantoja here. I think he's just so good.
Yeah.
He showed no signs of slowing down. As we covered in our previous pound for pound video, he hasn't been facing that good of opposition. I mean, he has done as well as he can do in his division, Pantoja, but the flyweight division isn't really as stacked as it once was. So maybe this is his kryptonite. Maybe a dynamic and very quick and powerful striker like Van can give him some issues here. But I can't go against Pantoja here, I'm sorry. What do you reckon? Do you think Van can pull something out? Or?
I mean, I think it's... Even though I really, really, I like Joshua Van, he's one of my favorite fighters currently. I think that, he has been so impressive in the last couple of months, in the entirety of this year, fighting so often.
Yeah. The
volume he has, and, the Royval fight was amazing. One of the best fights I think I've seen in the UFC.
Definitely.
Period.
Yeah, one of the best
such a good
of all
fight.
time.
Yeah, one of the best UFC fights of all time. But, it's almost like, Dustin Poirier in lightweight, and, Max Holloway. All the best, most fun fighters to watch, they aren't always the one who gets the belt. That's
big
the problem.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's a really big point, because Michael Chandler is one of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC, but he's, in my opinion, not top 15 lightweights even. But
no.
When he gets in there, there's no technique. He just goes in and swings. Even though he's a wrestler, he chooses to strike, and his coaches are very mad at him because he does the wrong game plan. But as a fan, it's amazing. Same thing, like you said, Holloway a bit, even though it's a bit smarter. Justin Gage, he comes to mind. He just has a war every time. But that doesn't get you a belt most times. And it also makes a lot of damage. And that's a bit what I'm a bit worried for Joshua Van, because I really like him as a fighter, as you said. But when you take that much damage from guys like Royval, like the best guys, they punch very hard. Yeah. And when you go that many rounds, take those many shots...
And fight so often,
Yeah, so active.
Every few months.
And has a style that I really respect. I love the style that, he's willing to give one to take one as well.
Yeah.
He's not a coward. But I think in the long run that can get him hurt. And Pantoja is not the best striker. I mean, he's clean, but he doesn't have a lot of power.
But he can take him down.
That's the thing. Yeah. I actually, moving on to a prediction here, I actually expect Pantoja to get a takedown somewhere, maybe round 2 or 3, get to his back, and I'm actually going to go with the Pantoja submission here, probably round 3, in my opinion. What's your prediction? What do you think?
I don't want to see him go out that way, but
no.
I'm inclined to agree. I think that, I don't know, we haven't seen so much of, Joshua Van's takedown or submission defense. He fought, obviously, Royval, but there was no takedowns, the entire fight. Before that, he fought Bruno Silva, and he defended most of the takedowns except for one.
Yeah.
Who got through, but he won that fight by TKO. So, I think it's really hard, but, we also have to remember, this is Pantoja, Alexander Pantoja. This is not, Bruno Silva or whoever other guy that you can meet in the flyweight division. This is literally the best fighter in the flyweight division, top 5 pound for pound. Probably it's an incredible fighter, and so I have to go with, even though I want to really see, I would love to see, Joshua Van at least survive the 5 rounds and get some credit. Yeah, get some credit, even if you lose a decision, go for the striking a lot, get taken down.
Maybe hurt him a bit.
Yeah, some exciting moments with the crowd, especially if he gets taken down, but I don't see it, and I think that I'm going with a 3rd round submission. I think he can hang in there 2 rounds.
Yeah.
Piece him up a little bit, maybe Pantoja, he wants to give a good fight for the crowd as well. He wants to strike a little bit, and then when he feels like this guy's doing too much damage, he's doing too much on the feet for me, I'm gonna take him down, I'm gonna take his back, and I think he can achieve that. I think that Pantoja can do that basically against anyone in the flyweight division that's not a top tier grappler. And
true.
I don't think Joshua Van... Obviously, Joshua Van isn't that, because otherwise he would have gone for takedowns himself.
Yeah.
Versus guys like, Royval, and he didn't. He wanted to strike versus Royval.
Yeah.
One of the best strikers in the division.
Yeah.
Maybe the best striker in Royval. And he wanted to strike with him.
Yeah,
and he
that's impressive.
So just that is impressive. And that's...
Maybe he can damage him. Maybe
yeah,
Van
he can
Kemp
damage him, but I have a really hard time seeing him not being able to get a flash knockout on Pantoja. Pantoja it's not the type of guy to just get flash knocked out like
He hasn't been yet, but I mean,
no,
he's gonna be someday. Most fighters are one
Yeah.
day. Maybe this is it. And I mean, the roof of the T-Mobile Arena will be going off if Joshua Van manages to put out Pantoja. And I mean, even at 24 years old, if he manages to hurt him, Pantoja gets a bit blooded up. Even if he loses, that would still be a very good image for Joshua Van, and he would probably be still the number one contender then in that case. So, but definitely, as always, when Joshua Van fights, a very exciting fight here as well. All right, then it's lastly the main event of the evening. I mean, the bantamweight goat for sure, Merab taking on Petr Yan. Really interesting fight. If he wins this, he has defeated basically everyone who's anything in the bantamweight division twice.
Yeah, twice. That's crazy.
But I mean, Petr Yan is obviously another fan favorite for a lot of fighters. He's very entertaining to watch. He has been managing to put a few wins together now. Obviously Marcus McGee, but also Figgy, Song Yadong. It's quite a good streak. In my opinion, I might be harsh. He hasn't looked though as good as the Yan of old.
I completely agree. I think that not to interrupt you here, but that's one of the main points for me this fight. If I'd have seen, which I really do rate, Petr Yan's his run of form here, but if I had if he knocked out Marcus McGee or had a run of knockouts, then I'd have a different opinion here. But he did look good, but he looked like the base level Petr Yan. He didn't look like someone who, in the last couple of fights, he doesn't look like someone who will improve to the extent that he can go up against Merab Dvalishvili and dethrone him.
No,
so for me, the prediction in this fight would probably be at least a Merab unanimous decision. Again, I don't see it going differently because I haven't seen Petr Yan fight so differently. No. And I think that he's...
The only thing I could say though... to counter that is that Yan, because I totally agree that his last 3 fights, even though it's one, I wanted him to do a lot more, and if he had gotten a bit more impressive wins, he wouldn't have needed 3 straight wins to get the title shot, because the fans love him as well, and he's obviously one of the best guys in the bantamweight division. However, I reckon there are a few fighters, they can look a bit sometimes, and you're frustrated as a fan, you know that you have better potential than this. But Petr Yan strikes me as a guy who steps on the occasion. He steps up, He performs when the most pressure is on. And so I think he can do better against Merab than I honestly would have predicted lately that he would have been doing if you look at his last few fights, if that makes sense. Because I do think that he rises to the occasion, so to speak. But is it going to be enough? In my opinion, a straight no. We can't disrespect Merab Dvalishvili. We've barely seen him fight. Maybe, like he's mentioned himself, I believe it was the last round against Sean O'Malley in that first fight, I reckon. The kick to the stomach where he kind of held his hand there and said that it was a bit hurt. But I mean, it wasn't like he fell to the canvas. He was still good and not hurt enough that even Sean was able to get on him and punish him for it.
Yeah.
So, will Yan beat Merab here? I can't see it personally. I mean, I just can't.
I think that, with some of your points there, I agree with you that, Petr Yan, he steps up to the occasion. And I think especially now, when he knows what Merab is, when he knows that he has so much, he has so much tape on him maybe, he does all of this stuff.
That's true.
Maybe he underestimated him last time. But the thing with Merab Dvalishvili right now for me is that he improves with basically every fight. And that's the biggest thing for me.
It's scary.
In this,
how can he do that?
That's the thing. If we would have had, Merab Dvalishvili, and he would have maybe had a slow decline, still winning fights but not really getting better, and then we would have, Petr Yan on the other side just improving with every fight. Then I would be like, I think Petr Yan maybe gets this done. He's improved his takedown defense so much, and he's done all of this stuff, and he's more active on the feet. He gets knockdowns together, or some knockouts maybe.
Yeah.
But for me, this is basically the same Petr Yan that we saw Merab last time.
Yeah.
in terms of base level, skill. But Merab, he has improved so much, I think, in his striking and just in his general, the way before he was mainly only a wrestler. That's the only thing he did.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think he does much better now compared to before is the way that he strings everything together. We saw
in the
Sandhagen
fight,
the Sandhagen fight and the second O'Malley fight I thought as well.
Yeah, really impressive.
Yeah, the way he used the striking to set up the takedowns, and then he also got a finish actually.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's going to get a finish on this one. I think Petr Yan is too secure, to get finished by Merab. And maybe Merab doesn't have the same. Maybe age will and the activity will catch up to him sometime.
That's a possibility. Yeah.
So he might not have the same activity, but I have a really, really hard time seeing Petr Yan doing enough to get a decision win. And then he has to knock him out, and Petr Yan hasn't showed that type of power.
That type of power as well.
Yeah.
Earlier on in his career, he really did, but lately it hasn't looked like that. So I agree with you. I think that's the only road to victory. It might sound disrespectful to Yan, but when you're facing the GOAT of your division, who is a cardio freak, you have to knock him out. You don't. It's a bit like Usyk in boxing. You're never gonna win on points. It's just not gonna happen. So you have to put a stop to him. Maybe, just maybe, I think there's always a case in combat sports when you're going into a rematch where you as a fighter, but also your whole team has had 5 rounds against this guy to just gather data. And like you said, even though in his last fight they can look at the tape, but when you've been in there with him, you had a game plan. Then obviously for Yan that game plan didn't work. Now his team, his coaches has had a new chance to recoup and make a totally new game plan. And sometimes we see upsets in rematches just because of that. But I don't believe that's what we're gonna see. The odds are obviously in huge favor of Merab here. Is it his 4th? I was gonna say, it sounds mental to say it's his 4th, but I think it is, right? His 4th title defense this year.
Title defense in a year, and that is completely
new record. The bantamweight GOAT already, and I'm gonna go with a unanimous decision. Did you say you went with that as well?
Yeah, I agree, because he didn't put Corey Sandhagen out of there, and
That's
even
true.
though I thought he looked good, he even dropped Corey one time in the fight. He outstrikes him, and he took him down. Tried to take him down 37 times, he got 20 takedowns. That is insane.
I mean, how does
and
he do
that
it?
is him at 34. But so that's the thing with Merab. If we'd have seen his stats decline slowly, eventually he's gonna get called out. But it doesn't look that way.
No,
he just looks like he's he just keeps going, even though that was his 3rd title defense in a year and only a few months after the earlier one. So it's I think it's too much. And even though I think that Petr Yan is better than Corey Sandhagen, I would
say so. I agree.
He's better than Corey Sandhagen, but still, does he have enough? Is it a big step up enough? Compared to someone like Corey Sandhagen, that you're gonna be like, oh, he's gonna defend 30 takedowns and then he's gonna take him down as well and maybe submit him or knock him out. That's the thing. Petr Yan with a knockout threat, that's a different thing if he'd had that. Because his striking is so clean, so good.
I might actually have picked him. If he knocked out his previous 3 opponents, I might actually have picked him. But he hasn't against less opposition. We've barely seen Merab hurt. So you're going with the unanimous decision as well, or?
Yeah, I'm going with the unanimous decision here for Merab, and I think that it might not be a 50-45 or something, whatever it was last time, but it's still gonna be dominant. I think it's gonna be pretty dominant, and especially once it reaches maybe the later rounds, and Petr Yan, at first it's gonna go into it like you said, it's the rematch, and all of the fighter rematches, they always have that energy that anything can happen, and you have that fire inside you. You're gonna get
the revenge.
You're gonna get the revenge. You're gonna get that guy, especially when it's for a title.
But
that's true. So I think that Petr Yan is gonna go in there with the first 2 rounds, and it's just gonna defend. He's gonna defend pretty well, I think, and it's gonna look pretty even. But then Merab is just gonna step his foot on the gas the later rounds, and okay, let's say that Petr Yan defends most of the takedowns, and he maybe not strikes. I think that Merab, he might just go the safe route for the last 2 rounds and just takes him down, and then as soon as he gets the takedown, just to get on top of him, try to hold him down. Maybe he doesn't even, because
no reason to risk it, right?
Yeah, there's no reason to really risk it, and I think that Merab realizes that, and I think that he might try to go for more striking early rounds, because Merab, he has been as we talked about, improving in the striking, and he has been experimenting more and more. But it would be suicide to go into only striking matchup versus Petr Yan.
No,
regardless
he would
if he
never
has
do that.
Yeah,
I
he would
mean,
never do
he's
that.
a bit crazy, but I don't think he's stupid, right?
No, he's not that stupid, or he's not stupid, you know. Even though he hit his head on the ice.
Yeah, of course.
Head,
But yeah, I agree with you as well. I expect us to see a bit. You know, what Islam beat JDM recently. He did so. He actually respected the power of JDM and decided to almost just lay on top of him for 5 rounds, just because he knew if I let you up and we start exchanging here, I might be in trouble. And I actually think that Merab has the same approach here, and that's why I think he's gonna take the safe route and just get this win and break the record. 4 title defenses in a year. I mean, it will be insane if he manages to do that, right?
Yeah, it will be completely insane, and we'll have to see once the fight starts actually how it will exactly play out. But we'll hope it be an exciting fight. We hope that, you know, even if Merab goes for the wrestling, that he'll try to, you know, get a lot of takedowns and not only lay on top or something, you know, that at least tries to chain wrestle. I think, you know,
that's true.
Over and over again.
Yeah,
rather that than just him doing something else. But I completely agree. I think that Merab will get this down, and we'll see exactly how close it will be. But I do think that it will be dominant. Maybe not like the last time, but still somewhat dominant. At least
quite clear.
Yeah, quite clear. Exactly. A clear unanimous. You know, not like that's a unanimous decision. That shouldn't have been a unanimous decision. I think it's gonna be like, you know, what can you do? It's a clear unanimous decision. You know, so.
All right. All in all, that's our final predictions for UFC 323 that comes up this Saturday in Las Vegas. And obviously, a very stacked card, has to be said.
Yeah.
2 main title fights, very exciting. And we look forward to watching it this Saturday. But that's all from us. So thank you guys a lot for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.